We need space. While she was texting another man, I agreed, and then I disappeared. I was in another state when her world fell apart, when she desperately needed me. I wasn't there to answer. The person who picked up the phone was a stranger to her. My name is Samuel Mitchell. I'm 58 years old, and for the last 32 years, I thought I had a solid marriage. I own Mitchell's Auto Repair in Phoenix, Arizona, a business I built from nothing but an old garage and a toolbox my father left me. My wife, Ritter, and I raised our son James there, watching him grow up between oil changes and brake jobs. Life felt predictable, stable, like a well-tuned V8 engine. But engines break down when you ignore the warning signs. It started small. Ritter began spending more time on our lifestyle blog, which she called Desert Rosy Living. She'd always been creative, taking photos of our backyard cacti and writing about Southwestern decor. I supported her, even built her a home office with custom bookshelves. The blog grew, and with it, her confidence. She started attending blogging conferences, networking events, and weekend workshops in Scottsdale. That's where she met Brad Marshy. Brad owned a digital marketing firm, one of those smooth-talking guys who wore expensive polo shirts and drove a leased BMW. He started by commenting on Ritter's posts, offering to help her monetize her brand. Soon he was texting her about business opportunities, sending articles on influencer marketing, suggesting coffee meetings to discuss strategy. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Business is business, right? But then I noticed how her phone was always face down during dinner, how she'd step outside to take certain calls, claiming they were collaborative brainstorming sessions. Her laptop became password protected. She started buying new clothes, saying she needed to look professional for video content. The real red flag went up at our son James's birthday party last month. Our whole family was there. Our daughter-in-law, Sophia, and our 8-year-old grandson, Jack. While I was grilling burgers, I saw Ritter in the corner of the yard, typing furiously on her phone, smiling in a way that made my stomach twist. When I walked over, she quickly switched to the camera app, pretending to take pictures of the desert sunset. Later that night, after everyone had left, I was cleaning up when her phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up with a message preview from Brad. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Our secret project is going to change everything. I didn't confront her. Instead, I did what any good mechanic does when something doesn't feel right. I started paying attention to the details. The mileage on her car didn't match her claimed destinations. The credit card statements showed lunch charges at restaurants she never mentioned. Her browser history, on the rare occasion I could see it, included searches like how to rebuild your life after 50 and signs you've outgrown your marriage. That's when I knew this wasn't a passing phase or a midlife crisis. This was systematic, calculated. She was building an exit strategy, and I was the last to know. But here's the thing about mechanics. We're good at taking things apart and putting them back together. And sometimes, when something is too broken to fix, you salvage what's worth keeping and send the rest to the junkyard. I just didn't know yet that I was the one being prepped for scrap. The first piece of concrete proof fell into my lap by accident. I was working on Ritter's car, a routine oil change she'd been putting off for weeks. When I popped the hood, I found something that made my blood run cold. A folded receipt, wedged between the battery and the frame, probably blown there by the engine fan. It was from a fine dining resort in Phoenix. 2 dinners, 2 glasses of wine. Total bill, $127. It was dated 3 weeks prior, on a Tuesday night when Ritter claimed she was at a blogger meetup at a local coffee shop. The receipt was signed. The signature wasn't hers, it was Brad's. I stood there in my garage, my hands slick with grease, staring at that piece of paper like it was a death certificate. In a way, it was. It was the death of whatever trust we had left. I had been married to this woman for over 3 decades, and she was having romantic dinners with another man while lying to my face about it. My first instinct was to storm into the house, shove the receipt in her face, and demand answers. But 32 years of marriage had taught me something about Ritter. She was quick with excuses, quicker with tears, and quickest of all at turning herself into the victim. If I came at her with accusations, she'd find a way to make me the villain for snooping. So, I did what any smart mechanic does when diagnosing a problem. I gathered more data. I started noticing more details. Her phone was always charging in the kitchen now, never upstairs where I might glance at it. She developed new habits, longer baths, expensive perfume I'd never smelled before, a sudden interest in working out at the gym. When I asked about her day, her answers were vague, rehearsed, as if she'd practiced them. The breakthrough came when I was cleaning her office. Ritter was at another business meeting, her third that week. As I was organizing some old tax documents, I accidentally knocked over a spare laptop, one she rarely used. It fell to the floor, popping open to a browser page she'd forgotten to close. It was a private messaging app I'd never heard of. The conversation thread at the top was with BM, Brad Marshy. My hands shook as I scrolled through months of messages. What I found turned my stomach to ice. They weren't just talking about business. They were talking about us, about Ritter and me. She complained about our boring routine, calling me predictable and set in my ways. She wrote about feeling trapped in a life that no longer fit, and how Brad made her feel alive again. The worst part was reading Brad's replies. He called me an anchor, holding her back, and suggested she needed to create some space to figure out what she really wanted. He even joked that guys like me were too comfortable to change and would probably just accept whatever she decided. That last comment hit me like a wrench to the gut. Asterisk. Too comfortable to change. They thought I was a pushover, some old fool who would just roll over and accept being discarded after 32 years. I took screenshots of everything and uploaded them to a secure cloud account. Then I closed the laptop and put it back exactly where I found it. When Ritter came home 2 hours later, she was radiant, humming a little tune and kissing my cheek like she always did. "How was the meeting?" I asked, my voice perfectly steady. "Oh, she said, already heading for the shower. Same old, same old. Brad thinks we can really expand the blog's reach." Asterisk. I bet he does, I thought. I just nodded and smiled, playing the part of the comfortable, predictable husband they thought I was. They had no idea what this predictable husband was planning. Knowledge is power, but applied knowledge is control. Once I had proof of Ritter's affair, I didn't waste time on self-pity or rage. I channeled that energy into strategic planning. My first stop was the bank. I'd handled our finances for 30 years, but Ritter never paid attention to the details. She knew we had joint accounts, but she was clueless about the business accounts. the investment portfolios, or the real estate assets I'd built up through careful planning and hard work. I met with our financial advisor, Tom Bradley, a guy I'd known since high school. Tom had helped me structure everything to minimize taxes and maximize growth. I needed his help for a different kind of protection. Tom, I said, sliding the printed screenshots across his desk, I need to restructure a few things. My marriage is about to get complicated. Tom read through the messages, his expression growing darker with every page. He knew Ritter from various social events. He probably considered us one of the most solid couples in our circle. Samuel, I'm so sorry about this, Tom said finally. What do you want to do? I want to protect what I've built, legally and properly, but protected. For the next 2 hours, we re-engineered my financial empire. The auto shop's assets were moved into a living trust. My investment accounts were retitled to sole ownership, backed by documentation showing they were funded entirely by business profits. The rental properties I'd bought over the years were transferred into a separate LLC. Everything we did was legal, documented, and based on pre-existing ownership structures Ritter had never bothered to understand. She'd signed papers over the years without reading them, trusting me to handle the boring money stuff. That trust was about to bite her in ways she couldn't imagine. The beauty of it was that none of it required her signature or notification. These were corrections to ownership structures that should have been in place years ago. I was just finally getting the paperwork right. By the time we were done, Ritter's potential claim to my assets had shrunk dramatically. The house was jointly owned, and she would get her share of that. But the business, the investments, the rental income that funded our comfortable lifestyle, all of it was shielded. She's going to be shocked when she finds out, Tom warned. She should have thought of that before she started planning her exit strategy, I replied. I'm just making sure she gets exactly what she contributed. Nothing more, nothing less. That afternoon, I opened a new checking account at a different bank. I set up direct deposit for my business income and transferred my emergency funds. The joint account would remain open with enough cash to cover household expenses, but my real assets were now safely separate. Ritter noticed nothing. She came home that evening talking excitedly about a new project Brad was helping her develop. She'd never been so animated, so enthusiastic about her future. She just didn't realize that future no longer included access to the lifestyle I had been funding. 2 weeks after restructuring my finances, I decided to test just how deep this betrayal went. I needed to know if Ritter was just having an affair, or if she was actively planning to leave me. The difference would determine my next moves. I told her I was going on a weekend fishing trip with friends, something I did a few times a year. Instead, I booked a room at a hotel 15 minutes from our house and settled in to watch. On Friday evening, Ritter texted me. Asterisk. Have fun fishing, honey. I'm just staying in tonight. Maybe work on some blog posts. At 7:30 p.m., I watched her pull out of our driveway, dressed for an upscale restaurant. 20 minutes later, I followed her car to Morton's Steakhouse, where she met Brad at the ballet. They didn't hug. They kissed like lovers who had been apart for weeks instead of hours. I took pictures from my truck, carefully capturing their faces in the clear evening light. Then I went inside and asked for a table where I could observe without being seen. They sat in an intimate corner booth, holding hands across the table, feeding each other appetizers, completely lost in their own world. But it was their conversation that truly opened my eyes. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught enough fragments to understand their plan. Words like timing, financial planning, and a fresh start floated across the restaurant. At one point, Brad pulled out his phone and showed her something that made her eyes light up. Real estate listings. From what I could see, they were looking for a house together. I left before they finished dinner. I'd seen enough. This wasn't just an affair. It was a full-scale replacement operation. Ritter wasn't just cheating on me, she was auditioning for her next life. Saturday morning, while she was supposedly sleeping in after her quiet night at home, I made my most important call yet. I contacted Ray Torres, a private investigator who'd done work for my insurance company after a suspicious garage fire years ago. Ray, I said, I need documentation of an affair, professional quality, admissible in court, if it comes to that. How much documentation are we talking? He asked, his voice all business. Everything. Dates, locations, financial records, communications. I want a complete picture of what they've been doing and for how long. That'll take some time and cost some money. I have plenty of both, I told him. Just make sure it's bulletproof. Ray was thorough. Within a week, he had documented 3 more dinner dates, 2 overnight hotel stays, and what appeared to be an apartment hunting trip in Scottsdale. He even managed to get photos of them looking at engagement rings in a jewelry store. Asterisk. Engagement rings, while she was still married to me. The final piece of evidence was a recorded phone conversation where Ritter discussed divorce timelines with Brad. She wanted to wait until after the holidays, she said, to minimize the impact on James and Jack. How thoughtful of her to consider the family she was about to destroy. But the most revealing part was their discussion about finances. She assumed she would get half of everything: the house, the business, the investments. She was already making plans for that money, talking about the life she and Brad would build together. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She had no idea that while she was plotting to take half of everything I'd built, I had already moved the most valuable parts far beyond her reach. Her entire fantasy, her future with him, was built on assets that no longer existed. At least, not in a way she could touch. The trap was set. I've been thinking, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Maybe we just need some space to think without getting in each other's way. Does that make sense? It does, I agreed. Actually, I've been thinking of taking some time for myself too. Maybe travel a bit, see parts of the country I've never been to. I could close the shop for a few weeks. Her eyes lit up. This was going better than she could have possibly hoped. Really? You'd be okay with that? Rita, if you need space to figure out what makes you happy, I respect that. I want you to be happy. She actually hugged me then, a gesture likely born from the guilt of how easy this was. Thank you for understanding. I knew you would. What she didn't know was that the preparations were already made. My travel plans involved a one-way ticket to Colorado, where I'd purchased a small auto repair shop in a town called Durango. The papers were signed, the lease was active, and in my name. My tools were already in transit. We need space, she had said. I agreed. So I moved 1,000 miles away. She thought space meant a few weeks of separation while she played house with Brad. I understood it to mean a permanent relocation to a place she would never think to look for me. The next morning, while she was at Brad's house, likely celebrating the successful manipulation of her predictable husband, I loaded my truck with my personal belongings and drove away from the life we had built together. She had no idea she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. Colorado suited me. Durango was a mountain town where people minded their own business and judged you on your work ethic, not your personal drama. Michael's Auto Repair became Harper's Garage, and within a month, I had a steady stream of clients who appreciated honest work at a fair price. I changed my phone number, deleted my email and social media accounts, and established new banking relationships. As far as anyone in Phoenix was concerned, Samuel Mitchell had simply vanished. The only person who knew my real location was my son, James, and I'd made him promise to keep it a secret. "Dad, what's really going on?" he asked when I called to explain my sudden departure. "Your mother needed space to figure her life out. I'm giving her all the space she could possibly want." James was smart enough to read between the lines. "Dad, is Mom seeing someone else?" I paused, considering how much to reveal. "Son, your mother is making choices that don't include our family. I'm making choices that protect what's left of my dignity and my future." He understood. "Whatever you need, Dad, I've got your back." 3 weeks into my new life, the first crisis hit. Rita's mother, Ruth, had a stroke, collapsing at her nursing facility on a Thursday afternoon. The facility called Rita's emergency contact number, but she was likely with Brad, ignoring calls from numbers she didn't recognize. When they finally reached James, he called me immediately. "Dad, Grandma Ruth had a stroke. Mom's been trying to call you, but she can't find you anywhere." "What have you told her?" "Nothing yet, but she's panicking. What do you want me to do?" This was the moment I had prepared for. "Give her Sophia's number. Tell her all communication goes through your wife from now on." James understood instantly. "Sophia will handle it. She's smart, Dad. She'll know what to say." When Rita finally got through to someone who could theoretically reach me, she found herself speaking to her daughter-in-law, a woman she had always treated like an outsider who wasn't good enough for her son. "Sophia," Rita said, her voice trembling, "I need to speak to Samuel. My mother is in the hospital." There was a long pause. Then Sophia's voice, calm and measured, came through the line. "Samuel has requested not to be disturbed. This is family. This is important." "I understand," Sophia replied coolly. "I will let him know you called. If he chooses to respond, he will." The line went dead. The one time she truly needed me, I wasn't there to answer. And the person who did answer treated Rita with the exact same dismissive priority she had shown others for years. Her problems were not Sophia's priority. 2 months later, I received the call I'd been expecting from my lawyer in Phoenix. Rita had finally realized her temporary space had become a permanent separation, and she was ready to fight. "Samuel, your wife has filed for divorce," my lawyer Tom said. "She's demanding half of everything and claiming you abandoned the marriage." I laughed, a real, genuine laugh. "She asked for the space, Tom. I gave her exactly what she asked for." "Well, her lawyer is painting a different picture. They're alleging you hid assets and fled the state to avoid your marital responsibilities. Good thing we have documentation of everything we restructured before I left, isn't it?" The court battle that followed was exactly what I had prepared for. Rita's lawyer, a Scottsdale hotshot Brad had likely recommended, came at us with accusations of financial fraud and emotional abandonment. They demanded forensic accounting, asset discovery, and immediate spousal support. What they found was a man who had meticulously documented a 30-year marriage. Every financial decision, every asset purchase, every business investment. The auto shop had always been separate property. The investment accounts were funded entirely by its profits. The rental properties were legitimate business acquisitions. Everything I had moved into trusts and individual accounts was exactly where it legally belonged. I hadn't hidden a thing. I had simply organized. The real blow came when Tom presented Rita's own evidence against her. The private investigator's reports, the photographs, the recorded conversations with Brad about spending my settlement money. It all became part of the record. Your Honor, Tom addressed the judge. Mrs. Mitchell asked for space to explore other relationships and make plans for her future with another man. Mr. Mitchell simply honored her request while protecting the assets he had legitimately acquired through his own business efforts. Rita's face went white as the recordings were played. Her own voice discussing how much money she expected to get from divorcing me, how she and Brad would use those funds to start a new life together. The judge's expression grew colder with every revelation. The final nail in her coffin was her own credit card records. While claiming financial hardship and demanding immediate support, she had been spending thousands on clothes, jewelry, and romantic getaways with Brad. Her credibility completely disintegrated. Mrs. Mitchell, the judge said finally, you asked for space to pursue other interests. The court finds that your husband provided exactly what you requested. Your claims of abandonment and hidden assets are not supported by the evidence. She got the house, which came with a mortgage that would cripple her income as a blogger. She got half of our joint savings, which amounted to next to nothing. The business, the investments, the rental income, the comfortable lifestyle she'd taken for granted, it all remained with me. Brad disappeared 2 weeks after the settlement. Apparently, a woman with a limited income and a heavy mortgage wasn't the investment opportunity he'd been hoping for. While I was building my new life in Colorado, Rita was dealing with the consequences of her choices in Phoenix. James kept me updated, not out of malice, but because he wanted me to know how our grandson was handling the situation. Dad, Mom's not doing well, James told me during one of our weekly calls. She's been posting a lot on social media, and it's getting ugly. Rita had always used her blog to craft an image of a perfect domestic life. Now, she was using it to air her divorce, and the results were spectacularly bad. Her first posts were pleas for sympathy, framing herself as a victim, going through a difficult transition. But as reality set in, the mortgage payments, the reduced income, Brad's disappearance, her posts grew more desperate and revealing. She started sharing inspirational quotes about betrayal and abandonment, clearly aimed at me. Asterisk. Some people will abandon you the moment you need them most. The problem was, people weren't buying it. Her followers had seen her document her affair with Brad through thinly veiled posts about exciting new connections and rediscovering passion. They'd seen the expensive purchases, the fancy dinners, the weekend getaways she'd claimed were business trips. Then, James made his move. My son had inherited my strategic thinking and his mother's understanding of social media dynamics. He posted a simple comment on one of her most dramatic victimhood posts. Asterisk mom. Everyone can see your Instagram stories. We know about Brad. That single comment unleashed an avalanche. Her followers started connecting the dots, scrolling back, revisiting months of posts, finding the contradictions and the lies. The blogging community she had worked so hard to join turned on her with a viciousness only social media can deliver. Asterisk. Wait, weren't you just posting about new adventures a few months ago? Didn't you say your husband was supportive of your personal growth journey? Asterisk. I remember seeing posts about business dinners that looked suspiciously like dates. The comments poured in, each one more damning than the last. Screenshots of her older posts were shared, proving she was celebrating her affair while maintaining the facade of a troubled marriage. Her follower count plummeted as people realized they'd been following a fraud. The professional fallout was even worse. Brands she worked with pulled their partnerships. Fellow bloggers distanced themselves from the drama. The carefully curated online presence she had planned to monetize as her new career imploded in a matter of weeks. Meanwhile, in Colorado, I was taking on more repair work than I could handle and enjoying weekend hikes with a photography group I joined. My social media presence consisted of photos of mountain landscapes and restored classic cars. The contrast couldn't have been starker. While she was drowning in the wreckage of her public lies, I was quietly building a life based on honest work and genuine relationships. A year after I left Phoenix, I had an unexpected visitor at my shop in Colorado. I was under the hood of a vintage Camaro when I heard familiar footsteps on the concrete floor. Hello, Samuel. I didn't look up right away. I finished checking the timing belt, wiped my hands on a shop rag, and only then did I turn to face Rita. She looked older, thinner. There was a desperation in her eyes I had never seen before. How did you find me? I asked calmly. James finally told me. He's been stonewalling me for months. Her voice trembled slightly. Samuel, we need to talk. I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But we can fix this. We can work it out. I leaned back against the workbench, studying the woman I'd been married to for 32 years. What exactly do you want to work out, Rita? Our marriage. Our life together. I realize now that Brad was just using me. I see that so clearly now. But you and I, we built something real. Something worth saving. We did build something, I agreed, for 32 years. And then you asked for space so you could tear it down. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean permanently. I just needed time to figure things out. I never wanted you to disappear completely. Rita, you didn't just ask for space. You planned my replacement. You discussed spending my money with another man before you'd even divorced me. You celebrated our anniversary while plotting your exit strategy. She flinched. You know about the recordings. I know about everything. The dinners, the hotels, the apartment hunting, the engagement ring shopping, all of it. But that's over now, she said desperately. Brad's gone. I'm alone. I realize I threw it all away. You're not alone because Brad left you, Rita. You're alone because you chose to be. You chose him. Over me. Over James. Over our grandson, Jack. You chose excitement over loyalty. You chose fantasy over reality. People make mistakes, Samuel. Don't I deserve forgiveness? I studied her face, searching for any sign of genuine remorse, rather than just regret for the consequences. Forgiveness is not the same as restoration, Rita. I can forgive you for what you did to our marriage, but I will not rebuild what you deliberately destroyed. So that's it? 32 years means nothing? It meant everything to me. That's why your betrayal cut so deep. But I am not the same man who let you walk all over him for years. That man is gone. She tried several other approaches: tears, anger, promises, guilt. But I remained unmoved. Finally, she played her last card. What about Jack? Don't you want to be a part of your grandson's life? I see Jack every month, Rita. He and James fly out, and we go fishing, hiking, camping. He loves it here in Colorado. The difference is, now he sees his grandfather as a strong man who respects himself, not as someone who tolerates disrespect just for the sake of keeping the peace. Her face fell as she realized her last piece of leverage was gone. I had rebuilt my relationship with my family on my own terms, free from her mediation and control. I'm sorry, Samuel, she whispered. I truly am. I believe you, I said, but an apology doesn't undo choices, and it can't rebuild trust. You wanted space to find yourself. I hope, eventually, you do. She left without another word. I never saw her again. 2 years after that final conversation, I was sitting on the porch of my cabin, just outside Durango, watching the setting sun paint the mountains in strokes of gold and violet. Jack, now 10 years old, sat beside me, carefully organizing his fishing tackle for our trip to the river tomorrow. Grandpa, he said, holding up a particularly colorful lure, you think this one will get the big trout? Maybe, buddy, I said, ruffling his hair. But the secret isn't the lure, it's patience and knowing just where to cast your line. James and Sophia were visiting, and they brought news from Phoenix. They'd sold the house. Ritter couldn't afford the mortgage on her own and had moved into a small apartment. She was working part-time at a retail shop, her blogging dreams having crumbled right along with her credibility. She asks about you sometimes, James had told me earlier. Wants to know how you're doing. How was I doing? I was doing just fine. My garage had become the most sought-after classic car restoration shop in all of Southwest Colorado. I had a 3-month waiting list and was training 2 young apprentices who reminded me of myself at that age, hungry to learn an honest craft. Good work speaks for itself. I'd bought 20 acres up in the mountains and built a small cabin with my own 2 hands. I had created a life that fit who I was meant to be, with no compromises, no walking on eggshells, and no enabling another person's selfish behavior. Jack looked up from his tackle box. Grandpa, do you ever get lonely? It was a perceptive question for a 10-year-old. No, buddy. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. I'm alone by choice, but I'm not lonely. I have you, your dad, and your mom. I have my work and these mountains. I have everything that matters. What about Grandma Ritter? Do you miss her? I considered the question carefully. I miss the woman I thought she was, the woman I married 32 years ago. But that person was mostly in my imagination. The real Ritter made choices that removed her from our family. That was her decision, not mine. You're happier now, right? Much happier. Because I'm living honestly now. No pretending. No making excuses for someone else's bad behavior. No sacrificing my self-respect to keep a false peace. As darkness settled over the mountains, James and Sophia joined us on the porch. We talked about Jack's school projects, Sophia's new job, James's promotion. Normal, peaceful family conversations, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone under the stars, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. Ritter had demanded space, thinking it would give her the freedom to juggle two men and two lives. Instead, it gave me the space to rediscover who I was without her manipulation and control. She wanted space to find herself. Instead, I found me. The mountain air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of pine and the promise of winter. Tomorrow, Jack and I would fish the river, and I would teach him about patience, persistence, and the quiet satisfaction of doing things the right way. Those were the lessons that mattered, not the drama of betrayal and revenge, but the silent strength that comes from living with integrity, surrounded by people who value what you value. I had built a good life from the rubble of a bad marriage, and this foundation would last.